Well, after Guardian, the show finally breaks formula with its most shocking episode yet.
Look away, 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 look away.
Hey guys, remember Series Unfortunate Events, Season 1, Episode 7, The Miserable Mill, Part 1. And guys, I was definitely really looking forward to this episode, more than I have for any episode really so far. And that's mainly because the fact that, yes, I have loved most of the season, as you guys know, but I'm not gonna lie, it has gotten quite formulaic. I mean, every episode seems to end with the Baudelaires, going to Poe, trying to prove to him that Count Olaf is actually the disguise that Count Olaf has, created. Poe doesn't believe them till the end of the episode. They get into the car, Poe takes them to their new guardian, and that's kind of how that ends. Now, every show definitely does have a formula. You could say that for every single show that's ever been made, that there is a formula. But it definitely was getting a bit predictable. And what I love is that this episode, we had no idea where we were going to go. Why? Because unlike the, 6 previous episodes, this is not based off of any previous, work. Yes, obviously it is based on a book, but we haven't seen this adaptation ever before. There's never been adaptation of Miserable Mill. There's never been any sort of film of it, so we're not comparing it to anything. Finally, we can actually look at this as its own thing and not compare it to the movie, which I haven't. I know a lot of people have. I actually have not done that a lot because I don't remember the movie. I don't remember it enough for me to be able to compare it to the TV show. And, as good as I think the first 6 episodes were, though, I definitely will admit that the thing they've tried to do is they've tried to find, different ways to tell that story, and I think for the most part they've done it very well, but this was an incredible episode. I really did love this episode overall. It was so different from the first 7, and that's something that, first 6, and that's something that I really did love. We got in this incredible twist in this episode that I thought was very well handled, as well as some very well done thrills, and just a perfect episode to set us up for the finale. I really love where this episode took us, but let's just get in this episode and talk about everything that happened. So we start off, and as we know, the Baudelaires, they snuck away on the lumber mill truck. This was, without Poe noticing, but Poe is then panicking. He realizes that they're gone, and he's obviously freaking out. He figures out that they have to act without delay, and once he gets free samples at Croco Chowder, and again, this just shows how absent-minded Poe really is. He always seems to distract himself. He always seems to go back to himself, and even though I think he does care for the Baudelaires, he cares about himself a lot more, and I thought that was kind of funny to see. I personally have not been annoyed by him. I think, yes, he was a bit annoying in episode 6, but I thought he was, fun here. So the truck drives to the mill, Klaus studies the photo, and the driver finally notices them, pulls over, and orders them off. Obviously because he's not just going to let them pass, he's not going to harbor 3 orphans that he doesn't know. So they also, probably because he's heard of them as well, we know that they've been in the papers constantly, and they've had so many, so many people have talked to them. They have such a bad reputation. So he probably thinks that they're just spoiled orphans that are just trying to hitch a ride, and he wants nothing to do with them. So the Baudelaires have no choice but to walk through the forest to the mill, which is Lucky Smell's Limber Mill, which they finally think is going to be the place where they're able to get the answers that they need. This is the place they know their parents worked. This is the place they know Uncle Monty's worked, Aunt Josephine has worked. Finally, they'll be able to get those answers, and I love the way the episode does set us up for finally getting those answers. And it really does seem like that we might actually finally get those. It's surrounded by burned ruins and a large wall, and immediately, this is a completely different tone from the other episodes, because there is no guardian in this episode. Violet, Klaus, and Sunny basically have to fend for themselves, and I actually really did like seeing that. Now, yes, the show has kind of alluded that, they're kind of able to take care of themselves, they're completely fine with being unattended to. They are just fine, you don't really need to worry about them. But I like seeing them without a guardian, because there are definitely characters to introduce, but it's not as much as, let's get to know this character kind of episode. This is much more focused on Violet, Klaus, and Sunny, and they try to work out how to get over the wall. Sunny discovers that the gate is open. The children then go in despite the warning against trespassers, and they see an eye-shaped building that looks like the one atop Olaf's manor. So the entire episode, they're very suspicious. They have this heating suspicion that Count Olaf is going to come back in some way, that he's one of the men here, and I like the way we're doing that. We can see that Violet, Klaus, and Sunny are very smart for this. Obviously, we know they're smart, but they know that, they're one step ahead of Olaf. They know that Olaf is going to come after them in some fashion, and they're prepared for his next disguise. So we then meet this man named Charles, who he comes up behind them, and I really did like this character. Violet claims that they're on a school trip, and that's the way they're going to make it seem like, they're not orphans, and Charles warns that the mill isn't a safe place for children and explains that he runs it. He shows them the photo, and he says that they better see his partner, and says that the town outside Poultryville used to be a thriving community until everything burned down except for the mill and the I building. So they enter the mill office and meet with Charles' partner, Sir, and Sir is one of the most shallow characters we have met on this show, and he's just as bad as Count Olaf. I mean, even though Count Olaf wasn't the main threat in this episode, Sir is a lot worse. He wants to put them to work as trespassers, and Violet's glad to do it as long as they have her home. And when she gives her last name, Sir says that he knows that name, but he doesn't associate it in a good way. It's a very negative reception because he starts to explain to their parents. He breaks into a fit of coughing. We get one of the funniest jokes we have ever gotten in the show, where Klaus says, "Why is it every time we try to get information, someone ends up coughing?" I mean, that was hilarious because, yeah, every time they're about to find out something big, it's dodged by someone either coughing or getting distracted by something, or Count Olaf thwarting their plans, and it just shows their frustration. They're tired of this. And yes, it was kind of a breaking the fourth wall type of joke, but it was also show their frustration. It's just shown that, they've spent all this time to get answers, and they still know basically nothing. They know a few things, but they really are not getting anything from anyone. They have to do it all on their own. They're kind of sick of it. So I did like seeing that. So Sir then continues saying that the parents are the ones who burned down Poultryville, we find out, and he's happy to hear they die in a fire and tells the children to get to work. So obviously he wants nothing to do with them at all. This perfectly sets up the main conflict of these two episodes. Again, it's a completely different type of atmosphere, and I love the way the show definitely portrays that. So, the one thing this episode does differently than the first 6 episodes have done is that it actually shows Count Olaf not with his troop. He's all by himself in this episode, and I actually really like seeing that. Look, as much as I do like the troop, Count Olaf is the main villain. Count Olaf is the one that we're supposed to be the most feared of, and they tried to, I think, develop Count Olaf a bit in this episode, and they did it pretty well. We see he's hitching a ride with the truck driver, Vander, who he constantly keeps calling truck driver, even though he says his name was Vander. I thought that was pretty hilarious, and he confirms that there were 3 children earlier, and he remembers Poultryville and the woman who broke his heart, and the truck driver drops him off near the mill. So that night in the mill's dormitory, the other workers are talking about the rumors about the Baudelaires, and this was incredibly well done. That's the one thing that I don't think the show has covered enough. And, in the first episode, they definitely, showed when, Mr. Poe's wife, I can't think of her name, Eleanor, there we go, Eleonora, when she was kind of, she was kind of romanticizing their death and, not their death, but their parents' death, and trying to make them, exploiting their sadness and things like that, and basically trying to make money banking off of it. And this is a very good example of that. Again, everyone doesn't see the Baudelaires as a good thing, and they say they're not allowed to talk about what happened in Poultryville because it's too terrible, and because they don't actually know. So, another man, Phil, comes in, tells the Baudelaires they're lucky to be unsupervised orphans, and Phil introduces himself, says he's excited to be working with the children, and Phil is way too happy for this atmosphere. I mean, he sticks out like a sore thumb because he seems completely enamored about everything. I mean, everything he sees, he's so happy about. This guy is just so strange, but you can't help but love his character. And he introduced himself, says he's excited to be working with them. And the children go over to the material, find a map showing a library. There's also a discount coupon to the eye building, an optometrist's office, we find out. And Violet suggests that the eye is a coincidence. Figures that they have finally found a place where Olaf can find them. And I love Violet's positivity here. The fact that she finally thinks, okay, this is it. This is our salvation. This is how we get away from Olaf. It just perfectly shows how they finally feel like they've beaten him. Like, finally, they don't need Poe. They've done this on their own. They're finally get those answers that they need. But, of course, we know that's not true once we cut to the next scene where Olaf enters the mill. He goes to the eye building that Dr. Georgina Orwell is inside, throwing darts at a photo of Olaf, immediately showing that they have a very bad relationship. And he says that he's an old friend who deeply regrets his actions. And she calls back through the door, wondering if Olaf just wants something for himself. And he laughs off the idea. The doctor opens the door, reminds Olaf that she took a solemn oath to never see him again, and I really did like Catherine O'Hara in this role. She did a really good job, and it was cool to see sort of like a sidekick for Olaf, because as good as this troupe is, I mean, they're idiots. They really are. Every single one of those characters are idiots. They're complete idiots. They don't listen to him. They're not obedient. So I like seeing someone that was on the same level as Count Olaf, maybe even more threatening than him. And I thought Catherine O'Hara just dominated this episode. She was incredible. She refused to let him ruin her long-term evil scheme, but Olaf tells her that they have another chance to destroy the Baudelaires, and you've gotten the sense that they've wanted to do this for a long time. And I'm also kind of thinking that Olaf maybe wanted to take a shot at them for a long time, not just after their parents die in the fire. He's wanted their fortune for a long time, and Orwell then perks up when she hears the size of the fortune involved, and he actually does get her interested. So again, this very well sets up the conflict between these two. You don't really know what's going to happen there, but I really did love the way that they set up this relationship, and again, it was a very different type of arc for Count Olaf, but they did a very good job with it overall. So the children go to bed, Klaus wants to leave, Violet wants to clear their names and get some answers, and that's basically the main reason why they need to stay, because Klaus is not at all happy with the atmosphere. But we see Mother and Father, they're out in the woods hiding, and Mother says they can't keep hiding their secret lives from their children. They're stranded in the forest near their crashed plane as men search for them, and we can see that, they want to tell Violet, Klaus, and Sunny. They're feeling like this is finally the time. We need to tell them everything that's been going on here. But again, they're not going to meet up with Violet, Klaus, and Sunny. So this episode is very confusing in this sense. At this point of the episode, I really didn't know where they were going to go here. I'm like, there's no possible way they're going to find them at that mill. There's no way. They're not going to figure out they went to the mill. They're not going to where there's no way they're going to get to Violet, Klaus, and Sunny. So I really didn't know where they were going here. But the next day we see that 3 children wake up to this butler serving them breakfast in bed. We don't know who they are, but they're just these 3 children. And basically, Lemony is contrasting their happiness with the turmoil of Violet, Klaus, and Sunny. The way they wake up, the foreman bangs metal pots over the sound system, and Phil says that their last foreman was nicer, but quit in the middle of the night, and it happens a lot at the mill, we find out. So the workers go out, the children go to work as debarkers, and they take a 5-minute lunch break, which is crazy to think about. And it's not even lunch, it's gum. Like, literally, they eat gum. They don't even eat food. And gum, obviously, that's not something that's going to fill your appetite. That's something that maybe you'll chew to focus or chew to study, but it's not really food. I mean, I wouldn't really count it food at all. It's just kind of something you chew just because, you want to chew and you're little, you want to chew, basically. And the others explain that they get paid in coupons, and the workers then refuse to leave. And again, you just see how bad this place really is. They're not even paid money, they're paid in coupons, and they're insisting that Lucky Smells is their life, and for whatever reason, they don't want to leave. And you can tell that they're kind of been brainwashed in the sense. They think that this is their home. They think that as bad as this is a place they can never leave. And the Baudelaires then sneak into the library, but Sir and Charles find them. Sir insists that their lunch breaks are for chewing gum, not sneaking off to libraries, and asks if the children are going to cause problems. And once Sir leaves, Violet tells Charles that he should be able to stand up to his partner, and Charles warns it's complicated and he quickly leaves. So they really did do a good job with developing Charles. He very much reminded me of Justice Strauss, someone who, despite seeing doubts and cracks in the foundation, isn't really willing to do anything. He's kind of just standing there. He's kind of just accepting it the way he is. And unlike Justice Strauss, though, he knows that Sir is bad. He knows what Sir is doing isn't good, but he doesn't really want to put a stop to it. One, I think because he's scared of Sir. I mean, he wouldn't be. Sir just seems like such a menacing person who will beat the shit out of you if you don't listen to him. I mean, we already know how bad Sir treats his workers. So Charles kind of has it good, though. He doesn't have to live off that gum diet. He doesn't have to be a worker, and I think he's worried if he does anything, he'll be in the same position as the worker. So you really do sympathize with Charles in that sense. And again, it just shows how great the show focuses on character, and Charles is a character that I think could have easily been like a Justice Strauss, where he was just kind of there, but just like they did with Justice Strauss, they really developed him very well, and because of that, I'm very interested in seeing where they're going to go with Charles in the next episode. So back at the mill, the children return to work. Klaus is wondering if the new foreman is Olaf in disguise just because of the way he's acting, and points out that he wears a mask so they never see his face. And Klaus has a very good point here. Obviously, Olaf does whatever he can to disguise himself, and this might be his greatest disguise yet. And Violet doesn't believe it, figures that Klaus is trying to find a reason to leave. She assures her brother that they'll leave once they clear their parents' names, and Klaus sees the foreman dozing in his booth. He tries to check his left ankle for the eye tattoo. The foreman wakes up. Klaus claims that he was looking for a new debarker, Barker, and he points out with his entire gloved hand, and Klaus notices something's wrong. The foreman then knocks Klaus to the ground, and I mean, this is way worse than Klaus getting slapped by Olaf, and they did such a great job again with taking this seriously, not trying to make this a cartoon. This was something they did take very seriously, and it steps on his glasses. He ends up breaking his glasses, and Phil points out that Klaus can't work if he can't see. He points that they have a great optometrist, Orwell, and takes Klaus there, and we know exactly where this is going to go, and now we're starting to see how these two things are going to connect. I did like the way that was done here. So Olaf and Orwell then have coffee. Olaf says he misses the two of them together, scheming evil, and he wants to run away to Europe and take over a country. But Orwell reminds him about the Baudelaires, and you see that Olaf kind of, Orwell's kind of his way of having a better life. That Orwell, he can finally have someone. I've said it before, we definitely got in the sense that Olaf is very lonely, and that he doesn't really have anyone that he can talk to, besides his troop. But his troop is useless. I mean, all they do is just, they praise him and they listen to him, but they're not really people he can confide in and people that he can really trust. Orwell is someone that he can. You kind of do sympathize with Olaf here. You understand why he feels this way. And someone calls and says that Klaus is on his way, and Phil then takes Klaus to the optometrist, assures the boy that doctors are their friends, and we then get one of the best parallels with Lemony we've had so far, where Lemony talks about how there was this altercation he got into with a refrigerator repairman, and it didn't really end well, but we see mother and father then stop said the same, refrigerator repairman that Lemony was just talking about. He's driving on the road and says that they're in urgent need of a ride, so he grabs a wrench, gets out, mother easily subdues him, and again, you don't know if this is actually going to work, if they're actually going to get there. But Violet goes with Sunny to the library, finds dozens of copies of books about the history of the mill, and they're all written by Sir, and Violet discovers that the chapter about the Paltryville fire has been heavily redacted. It's completely crossed out, but there's one copy that isn't crossed out, and that's the one that she's about to read. However, she sees Sir is on his way, and before she can read it, she hears someone coming. She hides with Sunny. Sir comes in, sees all the open books. He then rips the unredacted page out, and he pockets it and goes to have omelets, and just that suspicion, you can tell there's a lot more going on here, and Sir, I am 100% sure, was heavily involved with the fire that took place. I think that he definitely had something to do with it. I think he wanted it to happen, and I think that he definitely was one of the major causes of how this fire could have definitely, put the Baudelaire orphans where they are today. I think he's really been part of, one of the responsible parts of their misery, definitely. So once he leaves, Sunny shows Violet a dictionary that she found. The dedication is written in the same handwriting as her father, Bertrand Baudelaire. So yeah, now we know their father's name, Bertrand. And I thought that was really cool that we finally learned his name. And Charles then tells Sir that he doesn't see why they have to lie to the children. And Sir explains he removed the page and reminds Charles that to keep the mill open, then they had to make a deal with Orwell to blame the Baudelaires. So now we know that basically this was all Orwell's idea, that Orwell's always had this disdain for the Baudelaires. She's always she wants to close the mill, essentially, and they're doing what they can to keep it open by, basically blaming it on the Baudelaire's plight and blaming them for everything that happened. So I do like that Sir, again, is not really a bad guy here. He's bad, definitely, but he just gave in to Orwell, just like people give in to Olaf. And Sir then tosses the page in the fire. Violet watches from hiding as Sir says that the mill is all that he has, and basically, I really think that Sir means that. When he says the mill is all I have, he genuinely means that. He doesn't really have anything else. If he doesn't have the mill, he doesn't know where his life is going to go. He doesn't have any other purpose in life, and it's kind of sad to see, honestly, that he really feels that's all he has. And once he leaves, Charles gets the page from the fireplace while Violet sneaks out with Sunny, and Orwell comes and collects Klaus from her waiting room, and such a trippy scene. I mean, this show, it's been relatively simple. I don't think it's been too trippy, but this scene was trippy, and this is another great example of the show. It's confidence and just going for it, and they did such a great job with this here. He puts her in a chair, and she explains that an eye exam is standard procedure. He says that he doesn't feel good because everyone blames his parents for the fire, and Orwell says that she met the parents. She then clamps Klaus into the chair, begins hypnotizing him, and Olaf then comes in, disguised as Orwell's assistant Shirley, repeats Orwell's command. We don't exactly know what's going on, but there's some weird hypnotism. You know, she tells him to look at all these different things, and suddenly he is hypnotized, and at the door, and Violet ends up waiting for Klaus, and after lights out, he comes in without his glasses, smiles at Violet, calling her sir, and says that he's happy to be there. So Violet tells him what she overheard, but Klaus ignores her and goes to bed. And she takes off his shoes, goes to bed, blames herself for saying for staying when Klaus wanted to leave, and the next morning the foreman wakes everyone up over the loudspeaker. He tells Klaus to bring Sunny, and by the time Violet gets up, everyone else has gone to work, and Klaus, holding Sunny, tosses wood into the mulcher. So Violet then runs up, takes Sunny, obviously because it's very dangerous what he's doing. You know, Sunny shouldn't be working in the mill, and demands an explanation. Klaus then ignores her, keeps tossing wood in, and this was the one thing that Violet did do that I didn't really understand why she did. I mean, obviously he's hypnotized. I think the best thing to do would have been to leave him alone. I mean, I get why obviously she was worried about it, but this might be the first unintelligent thing that Violet's ever done, which is, you know, try to get him to remember. I mean, obviously he's hypnotized. It's not going to work out. I feel like the best thing to do would have just been to leave him alone. You know, take Sunny and leave. I think it would have been the best thing to do, not talk to Klaus, but someone calls Sir and asks the Baudelaires are there. Sir denies everything, and Father then puts down a phone, tells Mother that they'll finally be with their children and nothing is wrong. They drive off toward a mill, and you're like, holy shit, they're actually about to find their kids. They're actually going to be reunited with the Baudelaires, and Violet tells Klaus that they can leave. Klaus insists that Lucky Smells is their home. Her love actually breaks Klaus's hypnotic spell, and it was a really great moment that she actually was able to break the spell there, and just by her saying, I love you, that broke it, but Mother and Father then pull up to a fancy door, brave themselves to see their children, and the foreman tells the Baudelaires to go to the fancy door because they have visitors. Charles is waiting, he gives them a peach, and says the children's visitors can't come in because then they'd be trespassers, but they're on the other side of the fancy door, and again, they do such an incredible job with setting this up, and right when we think that Mother and Father are about to reunite with the Baudelaires, they go to the fancy door, they open it, and call to their children, Duggan, Quigley, and Isadora, and their children are actually the rich children that we saw in the bed in the beginning of the episode, which was such an ingenious twist. So, yes, you heard me right. Mother and Father, these characters we've been following around since episode 1, are not the Baudelaires' parents. They are, in fact, the Quagmires' parents, and that is an incredible twist. I love that the show did this, because not only did it give us false hope, it made us think that the show was going to change something and that they were actually going to reunite them with the Baudelaires. The one problem that the season has had wasn't a problem at all. It was just a different way of telling the story. It was showing that there is another family out there that had a mother and father in prison. And, you know, we definitely get the sense that these two knew the Baudelaire parents, but either way, they're not the Baudelaire parents, and I love the way they set that up. I thought that was incredibly well done. It's a very well done twist. It makes a lot more sense as to why we've seen it, and now it makes me even more interested to see where the storyline's going to go, and it probably is one of the best things the show has done. It's a very ballsy twist, and it immediately shows us that, we have so much false hope in the show, and I love the way this episode provided us with hope and then crushed it immediately when they watch as the door opens. Lemony explains he visited Paltryville after the mill closed. Orwell's building had originally been the headquarters of a secret organization. There he learned what happened to Klaus and that the Baudelaire should have asked one more important question, which is, where is Olaf? The disguise Olaf puts Klaus's new glasses on him, reserting the hypnotic spell, and yes, right at the door we see is actually Olaf and Orwell, the worst possible thing that could have happened, and Lemony says that whoever called Sir was of no help whatsoever. Earlier, we see Poe, he calls Sir, is told the Baudelaires aren't working there. The banker crosses the mill off of his list of places to call and continues down the list, and that is the way this episode ends. Really incredible stuff overall, but let's just get in this episode and where we're headed for the finale. So, wow, I mean, really, this was an incredible episode, I have to say, especially the fact that we hadn't seen an adaptation of this. This episode just had a new resounding confidence that I think the other episodes didn't. And not to say that I don't think they were confident. I think the show's been confident from the gate. I think it's been something great about this first season, that it has been very confident. It has been willing to go into some pretty dark territory. But what I also loved about this episode is, again, the creative liberties they could take, the things they could do here, here were so different from the other episodes. I mean, once again, this was all the Baudelaires having to fend for themselves. They're in a different kind of situation. They're not with a guardian. They're with this man who's essentially been manipulated into making the Baudelaires as miserable as possible. You know, that's something that Orwell told him to do, because Orwell clearly wants to close down the mill. And we also know that Orwell probably knows a lot about, you know, what happened to the Baudelaires' parents, as well as, you know, what's happened to the secret organization, what is up with all that. I'm sure we're going to get more into that in the finale. All that stuff was very well set up, and I loved what they did with Charles and Sir in this episode. You know, they could have easily been just expositional characters, but they really did not do that. Yes, there was definitely some expository dialogue within Charles and Sir's interactions, but you really got a sense of who they are. Sir is a man who, you know, seems to be this very tyrannical, evil, sort of vile man, but really he's only doing it so he can make the, you know, so he can keep the mill open, because the mill is his only life, and it makes him feel good. It makes him feel like he has purpose, and without the mill, he doesn't really know what he can do. And Charles is someone who is willing to change things, but doesn't really know how to do it, and he's not willing to stand up to Sir. He's not willing to put his foot down and tell him that, you know, you need to treat these kids like, like kids. You need to treat them with generosity. You know, he's not willing to do that, and that really is ruining a lot of what's going on with the Baudelaires. That really is, you know, ruining their time there, and I really did think they did a great job of setting all that up. However, by far the best thing about this episode was the twist with mother and father. I mean, again, we have to remember, this show is for kids. This is a show that's meant to be a show that kids will watch and have a lot of fun with and definitely get invested in. And for something like that, I mean, it's a great twist, because it shows kids that not everything has a happy ending. You know, there's not always going to be that moment where the kids are reunited with their parents. And to a kid, they might not think of this as season 1. They might think of this as the end. They might think of it as, you know, now this is where the story comes to an end, and they're going to think that the kids are going to be reunited with the parents, and they're not. They were never the Baudelaire parents. They were, in fact, the Quagmires, but they were in the photo. We saw, you know, their characters, Mr. and Mrs. Quagmire. We saw them in the photo, and I love the way that they set that up here. Now, what connection they had to the Baudelaire parents, I have no idea, but that's something I'm definitely very interested in finding out. What connection did they have? What correlation was their job? You know, all that kind of stuff. Did they cause the poultry fire? I mean, there's so much stuff they can do. The Poultryville fire, there's so many places they can go with that, and I can't wait to see what ends up happening with that storyline, because that definitely is very interesting. And then, of course, the Quagmires as well. I'm definitely getting into their characters. I'm sure we're going to meet them. I heard they're very essential characters to this series. I have no idea what they do. I have no idea who they are, but that's something I'm definitely getting into, what they're going to do in the final episode. I'm definitely interested in seeing how they're going to connect into this. And then, of course, what's going on with Klaus, because that really is a shame what's going on with him. Now, what Orwell and Olaf are trying to do here, I don't really know. I don't know if they're trying to get Klaus to distance himself from Violet and Sunny so they can kind of use that as a distraction so they can do something bigger. What they're really planning on doing here, we don't really know. But we definitely did get more of a sense of who Count Olaf was in this episode, especially with his, you know, narration about how, you know, when he had that monologue with Orwell about, he told her, you know, how I want to, you know, go out to France. I want to have this life with you. But he can't have that. Orwell clearly wants something completely different. She wants to close the mill. You know, she does whatever she can to corrupt it. And she doesn't really have much interest in Olaf as a person. I think he definitely does, though. You can see that he genuinely does care about her, and it's sad to see, honestly. I kind of did feel bad for Olaf. Now, yes, Olaf is definitely a vile man, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't have a heart. You know, he definitely does feel real, and that's something that Olaf has felt throughout this entire show. He's felt like a real person, and they've done an incredibly good job with that. I love the way they've done that with Olaf. I thought that was definitely very well done, and I love the hope that this episode really had. Well, just like the Reptile Room Part 1, this one did an even better job at characterizing hope, because Reptile Room Part 1, you know, we knew that Uncle Monty wasn't going to last forever. We knew that they weren't going to reunite with their, you know, we knew that they weren't going to stay there forever. We knew that Olaf was going to come back in the picture somehow. Here, we really didn't know, because the Baudelaires were all on their own. Were they able to get those secrets? Were they able to fend for themselves? I mean, all that stuff was so well done. They definitely had some of the funniest moments in this episode, I have to say. I thought there were some very funny moments here. My only complaint with this episode, I didn't think Violet really was as intelligent as she's been some of the other ones. She made a couple irrational decisions, which I get. You know, she's a kid. She's not always going to make the best decisions. They did a good job of characterizing that here. But some of the things she did, like her trying to get to Klaus and things like that. It just felt a little bit out of character, so that didn't really work as well for me. And then Poe really did get the short end of the stick here. I want to see a little more with Poe and him on the search for the Baudelaires, but they didn't really show a ton with that. I'm sure they will in part 2, but they didn't really show a ton of him here, and I want to see a little bit more of what was going on there. Also, we didn't really see why Count Olaf went back, what his real motivation was, how he got there, how he followed them. All we know is that they got away, so I do want to find out definitely more about that. But overall, guys, was a very satisfying first part, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing where part 2 is going to be. It very well set up the finale, and I'm definitely going to give a series of unfortunate events, Season 1, Episode 7, The Miserable Mill, Part 1, a 4.5 out of 5 or an A-. Guys, this is the episode that really does show how confident this series really is. It's not trying to be like the movie. It's not, this is the first episode where they don't have to try to, derive from the movie or try to be something different and, present something different. They can finally do something of their own, something that hasn't been presented before. This is a very compelling story, and I can't wait to see where it's going to go. They really did everything they could to set up the finale, and I'm very interested in seeing where we end up going in that finale. There's so much potential, and I really hope it does deliver just like this episode did. But overall, guys, to my review series, Unfortunate Events, let me know what you guys thought of this episode overall, left your thoughts in it. And guys, we have one episode left, and I am definitely going to review the finale for you guys tomorrow. That will be my next review, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.